So we're starting off with the chapter Sermon at Benaras, and as I have discussed with you all, it's about a religious preaching, it's a religious discourse or a lecture which was delivered by Gautam Buddha, right? And he taught a very important, valuable lesson of life. And Gautam Buddha, as we know, he left his worldly life, he left a royal life to seek the path of truth about learning about life, about the reality of life. Now, here in this chapter, that is what we are going to learn about. We're going to read a very simple story and about the sermon which Gautam Buddha gave, teaching us a very important value of life. Okay? And Benaras, as you all know, a very religious place. And as you have told, as we have discussed, it is one of the spiritual places, the holiest places, Benaras Ghats we all talk about, right? And yes, so every devout, pious Hindu would want to go to Benaras. The temples there, it is famous for that. Okay, so let's start with the chapter and then we'll read what the sermon is about. What is it, that important lesson that Gautam Buddha teaches to this lady who comes to him with a problem? Gautam Buddha began life as a prince named Siddhartha Gautam in northern India. At 12, he was sent away for schooling in the Hindu sacred scriptures, and 4 years later, he returned home to marry a princess. They had a son and lived for 10 years as befitted royalty. At about the age of 25, the prince, heretofore shielded from the sufferings of the world, while out hunting, chanced upon a sick man, then an aged man, then a funeral procession, and finally a monk begging for alms. So when we read about Gautam Buddha, it was a normal life just like royalty lived. And there at that time, the Gurukul system was there with the students. They went away and they learned about life. They were taught the scriptures, and he was a prince. He was taught about, the martial arts and thing, all that, right? And after he's finished, came back home and he got married to a princess. And he lived his life like a prince for 10 years. And he led a very comfortable and shielded life. He was not aware of the sufferings that were happening in the world around him. And if you remember, last year you had read the story, The Happy Prince. Similarly, the prince was there. He lived in his palace, shielded away from all the problems of life. It was later on that as a statue, when he could see what is happening in his city, he realized the problems that were there, right? So here also, and so Gautam Buddha, when he came outside, he was there in the world. What did he see? He saw a sick man. He saw an aged man. Then he saw a funeral procession. And finally, a monk begging for alms. A monk, person who's given up all the material things, right? And is begging for alms. He's people for money or, like food. These sights so moved him that he at once went out into the world to seek enlightenment concerning the sorrows he had witnessed. And he wanted to know that why is there so much of suffering in this world? He wanted to find out all the answers to this. So he left his royal home, he left his princess, his young son behind to go and find the answers to these problems. He wandered for 7 years and finally sat down under a peepal tree where he vowed to stay until enlightenment came. So it is there, we talk in Gaya, that tree is there, Bodh Gaya Jiskam kehte hain, that peepal tree under which he sat and he got that. He was sitting there till he realized or read about the problems, about the solutions, about enlightenment. Enlightened after 7 days, he named the tree the Bodhi Tree, tree of wisdom. and began to teach and to share his new understanding. So for 7 days, he was there meditating and thinking, and yes, he got the enlightenment and he came to know about, you can say, the wisdom there. He realized that what is it that causes all these problems, how he realized about the reality of life. At that point, he became known as the Buddha, the awakened or the enlightened. Right? So the Bodhi tree is a tree of wisdom underneath which he sat. He got that enlightenment, and then he started sharing his enlightenment. He started sharing his understandings about the problems of life. At that point, he became known as the Buddha. The Buddha preached his first sermon at the city of Benaras. So the sermon at Benaras is also very important. That is the first place where he gave his religious lecture, right? Most holy of the dipping places on the river Ganges. So the Benaras Ghats, we talk about Benaras there, and along the river Ganges, that is said to be the holiest place. That sermon had been preserved and is given here. It reflects the Buddha's wisdom about one inscrutable kind of suffering. So we're going to read about that sermon. What was the lecture? What was the moral lecture that he gave on the ghats of Ganga, right, at Benaras? XI-XII had an only son and he died. In her grief, she carried the dead child to all her neighbors, asking them for medicine, and the people said, "She has lost her senses. The boy is dead." So this woman, XI-XII, she had an only son and he died. And she was unable to bear the loss of the child. She could not accept that her son had died, and she carried him to all the neighbors, all the places, asking them for medicine that a child could come back to life. But the people, they're telling her that she is not understanding or she's lost her senses. The boy is dead. At length, XI-XII met a man who replied to her request. "I cannot give thee medicine for thy child, but I know a physician who can." And after, like when he was going to all the people, asking them, begging them to help in bringing her child back to life, so she met this man and he said, "I don't have the medicine for your child, but I know one person who can give you this medicine." And the girl said, "Pray tell me, sir, who is it?" And the man replied, "Go to Sakya Muni, the Buddha." So he told her to go to the Buddha. He'll give you the medicine. XI-XII repaired to the Buddha and cried, "Lord and Master, give me the medicine that will cure my boy." The Buddha answered, "I want a handful of mustard seed." And when the girl in her joy promised to procure it, the Buddha added, "The mustard seed must be taken from a house where no one has lost a child, husband, parent, or friend." So she goes to the Buddha and he says, "You bring a handful of mustard seed." She's very happy that this is very easy for me to do. I can go and bring the mustard seeds. But there's a condition. What is the condition? That these seeds, they must be taken from a house where no one has died, whether it is in the family or whether it is, even in the relations there, right? So a husband, child, parent, friend, it has to be that whom she has, someone where no death has taken place. Poor XI-XII now went from house to house, and the people pitied her and said, "Here is mustard seed, take it." So they were able to help her. They gave her mustard seeds. But when she asked the question, "Did a son or a daughter, a father or mother die in your family?" they answered her, "Alas, the living are few, but the dead are many. Do not remind us of our deepest grief." And there was no house but some beloved one had died in it. So wherever she went, she got the mustard seeds. But yes, the people there, they told her that, that there is no place where you won't find someone who has not lost a near and dear one. In fact, a very truthful thing they tell, that the living are lesser, than the dead. Dead are more and the living people are less. And in every family, someone has lost someone near or dear. Kissa Gautami became weary and helpless. So she was tired and disheartened and sat down at the wayside, watching the lights of the city as they flickered up and were extinguished again. At last, the darkness of the night reigned everywhere, and she considered the fate of men, that their lives flicker up and are extinguished again. So look at the comparison that she has made. She's compared the life of men with this light, right? So they flicker up, the light here, we are there alive, a flame burns, that keeps us burning, that keeps us alive. But when that flame extinguishes, what happens? Our life is over. And similarly, that is what she saw in the city. The lights were flickering and the lights were put out, and the darkness of the night was everywhere. And she considered the fate of men, that their lives flicker up and are extinguished again. Flicker up, they lighten up. So we have that flame of life, and yes, sooner or later that flame, it dies out, right? How selfish am I in my grief? Death is common to all. Yet in this valley of desolation, there is a path that leads him to immortality, who has surrendered all selfishness. So before she could be taught any lesson, it seems she realized it herself. When she looked around her, she saw the darkness around her, the darkness of night. She compared the darkness with what? With death. That light or that flame is life. And just like the flame goes out, life goes out. Life is extinguished. Okay? And she thought that how selfish am I? I did not realize that death happens to everyone. That flame is going to be extinguished. And death is common to all. And there is a path that leads him to immortality, who has surrendered all selfishness. And the person who has given up all selfishness. So when we are alive, we are there so selfish. We want so many things in life. And the person who has given all that up is the one who would be immortal, right? Who is not selfish, who does not think about himself only. And look at her, she was just, so concerned, or she was in so much of shock over the death of her son, that she did not realize that this happens to everyone. Everyone has suffered that pain. Everyone has suffered that loss. The Buddha said, the life of mortals in this world is troubled and brief and combined with pain. For there is not by any means by which those have been born can avoid dying. It's natural. After reaching old age, there is death. Of such a nature are living beings. Naturally, this is the truth of life. What is the reality of life? The moment we are born, our fate is sealed. That yes, one day we are going to die, right? So this is what he tells her, that we cannot avoid dying. So after old age, there is death, and this is human nature. It's nature of all living beings. Who, whatever is alive has to die. As ripe fruits are early in danger of falling, so mortals when born are always in danger of death. The fruit, as it ripens on the branches of the tree, the riper it gets, the more chances it has of falling down, right? As all earthen vessels made by the potter end in being broken, so is the life of mortals. So many comparisons are there, right? So whether it's the fruit, whether like the vessels that we have, the earthen vessels, what happened? Sometimes, yes, by accident we might break it, or yes, so after like a couple of months of use, it might just not be useful anymore, gets broken. Both young and adult, both those who are fools and those who are wise, all fall into the power of death, all are subject to death. And so this is the reality of life. So whether it is the most powerful, whether he's the most strongest, whether he is the most foolish person, everyone is eventually going to die. And that is the reality of life. And the sooner we accept it, that is what is going to give us that peace, right? So we are there, and in fact, we live a life in the fear of death, that what is going to happen. And we are there. Yes, it is very natural that when we are born, it is decided that yes, one day we are going to die. Of those who overcome by death depart from life. A father cannot save his son, nor kinsmen their relations. Mark, while relatives are looking on and lamenting deeply, one by one mortals are carried off like an ox that is led to the slaughter. So the world is afflicted with death and decay. Therefore, the wise do not grieve, knowing the terms of the world. And it is very impossible to come to terms with, yes, we are not wise. We are not, of course, here, very enlightened people. So when we do learn about the death of our near and dear ones, we are sad. We cry for them. We mourn their loss. And he says that one by one, mortals kya hai? Living things, right? They carried off like an ox that is led to the slaughter. So we are just taken away. Death comes and clutches us and takes us away from our near and dear ones. And one by one, all of us, we are going to leave this world, right? And in spite of knowing that death is inevitable, death is going to happen, we do not really accept it. And when the time comes, when that moment comes, yes, we have a lot of pain, we have a lot of sorrow, and it takes a lot of time to really accept that separation. Not from weeping nor from grieving will anyone obtain peace of mind. On the contrary, his pain will be the greater and his body will suffer. He will make himself sick and pale, yet the dead are not saved by his lamentation. He who seeks peace should draw out the arrow of lamentation and complaint and grief. He who has drawn out the arrow and has become composed will obtain peace of mind. He who has overcome all sorrow will become free from sorrow and be blessed. So this is a very important message that he gives, that from weeping, from being sad, what will happen? We will suffer. Our body will suffer. It will make us sick, right? But this is not going to save our near and dear ones. By expressing our sorrow, by crying for them, by grieving for them, by mourning their death, nothing is going to change. And we should just take out that arrow, like you have your arrows, they're all kept, and just take that arrow out, of sorrow and complaint and grief. And if you just release it, let it go, then what is going to happen? You will obtain peace of mind. And you will, when you're going to obtain that peace of mind, when you have let go of that sorrow, when you have realized that, see, no matter what I do, no matter what is going to happen, my near and dear ones are not going to come back. So yes, so what is the important lesson that he teaches us? Death is inevitable. Death is a part of our life. And one thing is for sure, whoever is born is going to die, right? So sooner or later, whether it is the most strongest person, the weakest person, the most powerful person, the most intelligent person, everyone is going to meet their fate. And what does he tell us? That we should not spend time in expressing our sorrow, rather let our sorrow go, let our tears go, and when we obtain peace of mind, that is when we will be blessed. That is when we will realize what life is all about. Okay? So it's a very important sermon that Kisa Gautami, the young lady who's lost her only child, that she learns, right? So what was the task that she was assigned to do? To bring mustard seeds from a family, from a house that has not lost any near or dear one. She is unable to do that, and she learns a very important lesson, that is, death happens to everyone. I've lost my son, others have also lost their near and dear ones. And where did this sermon take place? This was first sermon that was given by Gautam Buddha on the banks of the river Ganges at Benaras, which is said to be one of the holiest places. Okay, right?